All right. Good evening, everyone. All right, so let's kick off. The new chapter. They're up to the third perek, very famous perek in Bava Basra called Chazakah Habatim. Okay, we're already a week and change already into the chapter. And I wanted to start off with the Mishnah and just give a basic introduction as to this concept of what we call Chazakah. Okay, or in English, a presumption of previous status, because that's what this parak is all about, as we've seen so far. So let's go and start off with a Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah says we are on Taf Ches 28a on top. Okay. So the Mishnah starts off by saying, Cheskat habatim v'haboros v'hasichin v'hama'aros v'hashovchos v'hamerchatzos v'beis habadin v'beis hashalchin. There are a whole laundry list of items. The first one being real estate, homes, wells, caves, coops, bathhouses, olive presses, slaves. Okay, the chazakah that you attain has to be for a period of 3 years from day to day. Okay, that is basically what the Mishnah says. And if you just do a quick Rashi explains in the second or third skinny line that says, Chazakah gimel shanim ve'eno tzricha miyom. I'm sorry. The Mishnah continues and has a discussion. We're going to leave that out for now. The key point I want to take away from the Mishnah is this concept of that a chazakah is 3 years. Okay? And then Gemara goes on to discuss the source. We'll see that in a minute. But in order to get a better understanding of this concept of chazakah, I want to show a Gemara in Chulin. Because as we love doing in this class, as you know by now, I love looking at sources for everything. When you look, whether it's something written in the Torah Shebachsav, something in the Chumash, or a referenced Gemara, Costa Rica. The best way to understand the concept is to find out where the source is. So the Gemara wants to know, we have this term chazakah. So the Gemara asks in Chulin, I am in Chulin Daf Yud Amud Beis. The Gemara wants to know, Minaha milsi da Amar Rabbanan uki milsa achazake. Okay, so just as an introduction, why this Gemara is in Chulin. Chulin, if you remember, the first chapter talks about the basic rudimentary laws of Shechita. And the Gemara on Daf Tes or Daf Yud has a statement from Rav Huna. It's called Behema Becheskas Iser Omedes. If you have an animal, okay, and you see it shechted, and you're not sure if it was shechted correctly, so we look, right? We say to ourselves, this animal, when it was alive, it existed in a category of Isur, meaning you just can't go over to an animal walking in the zoo and start eating it. Obviously, because it's not kosher. It's called Eiver Menachai. You can't eat a live animal. The only way to eat an animal is to kill it first. And to go through the ritual slaughtering that we call shchita, that is something called a matir. That permits the animal for human consumption. So if I'm not sure whether an animal was shechted correctly, I have to go back to the last moment in time, which is when this animal was in the slaughterhouse. Okay, we don't know if it was shechted correctly. The only thing we do know was that it had a heartbeat and was living. At that point, though, the animal wasn't kosher, right? So therefore, if I'm not sure whether or not the animal was shechted correctly, you have to rule stringently, and therefore you can't eat the animal. Why? Because as we just mentioned, the status quo or the last known presumption of this animal was no good. So therefore, we continue that no good up until we have evidence that it's good, or what we call guilty until proven innocent. Okay? We have the same concept, if you remember, many Gemaras talked about a mikvah, okay, that was chaser, and people went into the mikvah, and you're not sure what at what time. So this concept of chazakah applies to animals, applies to mikvahs, and we're going to see it applies to a lot more things in life. So let's start off by answering the Gemara's question in Chulin Daf Yud Amud Beis. Where does this concept come from? Now, it doesn't come from the Torah, right? The concept of rov actually comes from the Torah, okay? The concept of chazakah doesn't really come from the Torah. You have to do a little bit of digging. And the digging that the Gemara does is from a very, very obscure chapter tucked in the middle of Vayikra, found in Parshas Mitzorah, believe it or not. Says the Gemara, Amar of Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar of Yonasan. Shmuel bar Nachmani explains, and by the way, it's interesting to note that Shmuel bar Nachmani, who we discussed about 3 years ago in a shir together, Rachel Eliza might remember this, in Moed Katan, where we discussed that Shmuel bar Nachmani was Mr. Agadata. He's always bought in when it comes to Agadatas. There are a few exceptions, though, when it comes to halachas, sources of halachas. If you remember the Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Mem Vav says, we know the concept of Hamotzi Mechaver of Horaya from a pasuk, and Ram Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rav Yonasan is the author of that brisa. And so too over here, of Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rav Yonasan comes up with the source found in Parshas Mitzorah. Amar, the pasuk says, "V'yatzah hakohen min habayis el pesach habayis v'hiskiras habayis shivas yamim." Okay, so let's stop for a second. So because this is a little known law, simply because it's not a common thing that we learn. In fact, the most famous law that we know about the parsha of Nigei Batim, which is that not only could humans get leprosy or tsaras, there are 3 types of tsaras: human, clothing, and homes. Those are the 3 elements that can get tsaras. So when a house gets tsaras, right, that's also possible. And the Torah goes into detail. But the most famous, at least in my humble opinion, aspect of Nigei Batim is the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Aleph, that says that it never happened. So we have all these laws about something that never happened. So we're going to learn and that's why this is very ironic, how we're learning such a fundamental idea in tort law, right? Which is Chazakah. We learn it from pasuk about Nigei Batim, which probably never happened. But anyways, putting that aside, that's all academic. The Torah describes the process. A person has a house. He calls a Kohen in one day and he says, I see a spot in the house. Here's the psukim. I'm reading from Parshas Mitzorah, Perik Yadalit. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe bar Lemar ki tavo el eretz Canaan asher ani noten lachem lachuzah v'nasati nega tzaras beveis eretz achuzatchem uva asher lo habayit v'higid lakohen lemor kenega nirali. Person wakes up one day, he goes to the Kohen and says, I think I see something weird in the walls of my house. There's some kind of nega that I see. So what happens next? V'tziva hakohen upinu asabayis. The Kohen comes and he orders the house completely cleared. V'terem yavo kohen lirosas hanega. Before the Kohen examines the nega, v'lo yit ma kol asher babayit, so that nothing in the house becomes tamei. V'achaken yavo hakohen lirosas habayis. The Kohen comes and makes an appointment to go check out the inside of the house. So what happens? The Kohen comes in. He sees that there's some kind of green color or reddish streaks that appear in the walls of the house. There's something weird going on. Right? And it appears to go deep into the wall. So what happens is, and this is the pasuk we're quoting in Chulin, v'yatza ha-kohen min habayit al pesach habayis. The Kohen, once he sees these weird signs, he gets the heck out of there, okay? V'hiskira tabayit shivas yamim, and he closes up the house for 7 days. No one's allowed in. Then, after 7 days, the next pasuk says, "V'shav ha-kohen b'yom hashvi'i v'rai b'nei pasah nega b'kiras habayis." He comes back on the 7th day, and if he sees that these weird streaks grew, and then now they're all over the place, so then it's called without going into the psukim, the house is called a Beis HaMenuga. It's officially demolished. They bulldoze it, and it's so tameh that they have to take all the stones and all the sheetrock and plaster and walls and plumbing, and they get it out chutz lamachne. Okay, so that's the enigmatic story of our Nigei Batim. So we take from this, again, it's very interesting when we have these theoretical concepts that probably never happened, and we learn some obscure law from this. But this is exactly what the Gemara does. It searches for the most far out case. So what's the upshot of the Gemara? What are we learning from this about a Chazakah? So Gemara says, okay, the Kohen goes and he leaves the house. So he sees the green color on the wall and he gets out. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Dilma adenafik va'asa batzule shira. We know that there's a certain size. I think it's called a gris. There's a certain size that the tsaras has to be. So Gemara says, hold on a second. It takes him 10 seconds to leave the house. So when he turns around and he leaves the house, maybe what he saw 5 seconds ago doesn't exist anymore. Meaning maybe that shear is not so big anymore, and there's no tsaras. So why are you knocking down the house? Why is it called Beis HaMenuga? Elav mishum darmin and ukiya chazakah. It must be because he saw it 10 seconds ago, and like our animal that we've been discussing in Chulin on Daf Tes, that we go after the last known event, and the last known event, the status quo, the last thing that the Kohen saw, that it was Tameh. So therefore, you want to say it's Tahor? You need some kind of proof. We leave matters the way they are until proven otherwise. Hence, the concept of Chazakah. Okay. So you would think that the Gemara would be satisfied. No. Again, it's very important. The reason why I'm looking at this insight is because it's very, very important to know sources so you understand the concept. So Maskefler Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, so the Gemara in Chulin continues and says, I got a good one. Maybe I can disprove your whole point. How? Bedilma kagon sheyatza derech achora to kachazi leikinafa. Meaning, maybe the Kohen was walking backwards, right? And if you walk backwards, you could zoom in, you could continue looking at that mark on the wall until you even close the door. So therefore, it's no proof that there was a gap where he didn't see the mark and he left, and we could just say, well, it's presumptive that the mark was there. Good question. So Amarle Abaya says, I don't like that question. Shtei tshuvas v'davar. No, that's not a good question. First of all, how do you even know that the Kohen's allowed to walk backwards? No way. Kohen can't walk backwards. V'od, and even if you're right that the Kohen can walk backwards, maybe there's a spot right at the last second by the door. So therefore, when he's leaving, right? So therefore, when he's leaving, there could be a spot over there also, right? So therefore, there's no 10-second gap. So therefore, your question is not really a good question. So maybe Abaya says you could reinstate the question because why? Because you broke open the wall and you have a window now, and now you could go out and see, you could walk forward, but you could see somehow all the light in the room, and you can make out that mark. A house that's dark, you can't open up a window to see the nega. Okay? Which, by the way, there's a side point on that I heard about not finding someone's faults, right? Meaning, if a person comes to you for X, don't tell him he's got Y and Z problem also. That's also a little mussar I heard once about that Mishnah in Nagoyim, about a dark house. You don't open up a window to go see if there's more Nagoyim. Anyway, just a side point. But anyway, the Gemara goes back and forth, and in the end, this is our story that we learn from the Bayis HaMenuga, the concept of a Mitzorah. Okay? So one thing I wanted to show you on this is the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer has a comment because the Gemara says, how do you know Uki Milsa Achazaka? Okay? So the Chassam Sofer says, and it's like a general introduction to the concept of Chazakah, because we use the word Chazakah interchangeably. Okay, the Chassam Sofer points out, he says, the Gemara doesn't say, how do we know that we go after a Chazakah? Like the Azlin and Basar. The Gemara later on in Chulin, if you remember, says, how do you know the Azlin and Basar Ruba? How do you know that you go after the concept of Rov? So the Gemara doesn't say that we go Azlin and Basar Chazakah. It just means that we let matters stay, they are on their presumptive status. So he has a whole discussion, and he says, because the term Chazakah really is interchangeable. He says, the Chazakah denemer b'shas b'kama duchte shehu cheskas haminhag. Okay, he says that the word Chazakah actually is similar to what we call a minhag, meaning we do something, right? We have a minhag. We don't know why we do it per se, right? If you ask the average person what's wrong with eating, kitnios, it's a minhag we had for 600 years. No one really knows the reason unless you really know the reason. But most people don't understand why. It's just a minhag. So therefore, that's the presumption. It has a chazakah. You do something until proven otherwise, that it's wrong. And he goes on to say, Mikola cheskas hitnahagutam anu dan in shakachu. Okay, and he gives examples, very, very good examples. If you've been through Shas, you should understand this concept. For example, if a woman, right, women used to wear different clothing in the month depending on their nida status. So we don't know if a woman was a nida, but if she happened to be wearing her big day nida and the husband was with her, then therefore the chazaka is that she's a nida. And the husband would be chayiv malchus. Hainu mishum she'ein minhag shetilbosh big day nida imlo shehi nida. She wouldn't be wearing those special bagadim only unless she in fact was a nida. V'harehi hechzika ba'atzma shehi nida. Period. That's one example. Then he's going to give an example we had about a month ago on Daf Hey. V'chen chazaka she'ein adam poreh b'toch zmanuhu. What does it mean chazaka in adam poreh b'toch zmanuhu? The word chazaka, that people don't pay their bills before they're due. Remember that? We had that old discussion on Daf Hey, machlokas between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish. He says, chazaka miminhag olam. That's it. It's the minhag of the olam. That's just the way it is. So therefore, if you claim that you paid your bill before it's due, then you have to prove it somehow, because you did something that is unnatural. Okay? Another one, chazaka lo mokim inish v'nafshe gabi yabim v'yavama. Different case regarding Yavamos. Lo yadanu v'lo ra'inu shakachu. We don't know something. Ela azlinan baskar, ela azlinan, but the Chassam Sofer explains this concept. He says we go basar cheskas minhag dava. We go after what we would call the minhag. V'zeh yalef b'Yerushalmi mak ava v'im. And in this way of explaining that the word chazakah is more related to the concept of minhag, we have to look at the source, okay? Because he says, "V'davar ze yalaf b'Yerushalmi v'maka ava v'imo." What's the Chasam Sofer talking about? He brings a Yerushalmi at the end of Maseches Kiddushin that asks a very similar question. Is Falgun of Yochanan Reish Lakish? Of Yochanan Amar Horgan ala Chazakos, Shum ben Lakish Amar Ein Horgan ala Chazakos. How strong is a Chazakah? Meaning, would we actually kill somebody if what the evidence we have against that person is that he did something wrong based on what we call a minhag? What's his example over here? His example is Rabbi Yossi b'Rabbi Bun b'Shem Rab Zera kol ama modi shehorgan al chazakos mapligin b'sreifa. Rabbi Yochanan amar horgan al chazakos ve'ein sorfen al chazakos. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish omer kishem shehorgan al chazakos kach sorfen al chazakos. It has to do with burning truma, okay? Something that we're not going to talk about over here, but he says that we would actually kill somebody, okay, if there's a chazakah that he did something wrong. So what do you mean a chazakah? If a person v'chal Shabbos, and he had two witnesses that warned him and said, don't do it, and he does it, then he's chayiv misa. So what would be a case where we're not sure if he did something, but there's a minhag or a chazakah that this person probably committed a sin? You know what his source is? Umake ava ve'ima mos yumas. Okay? A person injures his parents, right? We had this back in Bava Kama, right? A person had a blood injury, right? A person scratched his parents, right? Knocked them out and caused blood to come out. So we kill that person. So the Yerushalmi says, okay, v'chidaber bari hu shezehu aviv, v'halau chazaka shi shel aviv. How exactly do you know that the person who he's been living with, right, for 18 years in his house is in fact his father? Did we do a 23andMe test? Did we do genetic testing? We have no idea. But the answer is, we assume that this has been his father all his life. This has been his mother all his life. So you can't come, right, at the end of the day and say, well, we're not really sure if it was his parents. Truth is, we'll never know. But this is a classic example where we implore the minhag olam that everybody, unless known otherwise, grows up in a household and the two adult figures, well, you can't say that today, but okay, we won't get off on that, that the two adult figures in their house is in fact their parents. So here you go. So that's it. That's how the Yerushalmi in Kedushin ends. So too over here, you execute the person, even though you're not 100% sure that this is his biological father. Okay, so we saw the explanation of the Chasam Sofer, and then he goes on, and he actually brings other examples of the term chazakah. He says, "V'chazakos elu enen shavin." Not all chazakas are created equal. Interesting. Yesh mehen adifi afilu merov. There are those chazakas that are even stronger than rov. Remember, we had in Kedushin, ruba chazaka, ruba adif. If I have, right, we had rov and karov a couple of weeks ago in the second parak of Bava Basra by the Irani Dachas, if you remember. I'm sorry, by the Egla Arufa. There's also a concept of if I have rov that tells me to act one way, and I have a chazaka that tells me to act another way. So usually rov trumps chazaka, right? Here he's saying that depending on what flavor this chazaka is, it could actually sometimes be better than rov. And sometimes there are chazakas that are not only less than rov, they're even less than other chazakas. It all depends. You go in ein isha me'iza, right? A woman would never be mei as her husband. And then we have ein adam meiz panav bifnei balchovo. Min HaTorah, right? Remember that? Gemara in Bava Metzia, the famous Rabbah that says, why do we have this concept of Moed B'Miktsas? Because a person would never, ever have a chutzpah to look at his creditor in the face and say, you never lent me money. Okay? At least back then that used to be true. So therefore, that's called a chazakah, right? And that works on a d'oraisa level because based on that philosophy, Rabbah uses his hypothesis of the mode of miktsas, right? That's where it stems from, right? Then Vasa Rav Nachman bedora v'chayishla v'tiken hesis. Then Rav Nachman set up a shvuas hesis because most people would never lie, but therefore you don't have to take a shvua, but we'll throw a d'Rabbanan shvua on you just in case. Anyway, so he goes on and on, but it's just a very nice chasam sofer to know that there are different chazakos, and like he said, ein kol hachazakot shavot. They're all different. Okay. Okay, he goes on a little bit more. We'll skip the rest. So now that we at least have an understanding, we're gonna leave it at that. So before we get to the Gemara, there's one other Gemara in Kedushin Daf Samach Tes that also tells you the following. The Gemara in Kedushin says, Minayin lachazaka. Okay, we have the source. I'm sorry, not Minayin chazaka. The Gemara in Kedushin Daf Samach Tes says, the Tanya Rabbi Yossi Omer Gedola chazaka. Chazaka, we know, has, from the Gemara in Chulin, has a biblical source. And we're going to show you now how far we go that, right? Chazakah, we know from a minute ago that we can actually kill someone. So granted, that's the Yerushalmi. But the Bavli says, you know how strong Chazakah is? And it brings a pasuk, Umibnei HaKohanim, B'nei Chavia, B'nei HaKotz, B'nei Barzila, Shalakach Nos Barzila, Hagiladi, Isha, Vayikra al-Shemam, Ela Bikshu Ksavam, Hamisyachshin, V'lo Nimtzu, V'yigalu Min HaKahuna, V'yoma Hisrashta Lahem, Asher Lo Yochlu, Mikodesh HaKodshim, Adamot Kohen, L'urim B'tumim. What's going on over here? It's a pasuk regarding Ezra. When Ezra was the Gemara in Ksuvas wants to know, I'm sorry, the Gemara in Kedushin wants to know, how do we know that chalalim, right? Chalalim are those that are born from a unkosher kahuna marriage. How do we know that Ezra bought them out of Bavel? Remember, it says, Asara Yuchsin Alu Ezra mi Bavel. So he bought them out of Bavel. And the Gemara goes through various sources, and he took them out of Bavel, and the Gemara wants to know how. And based on knowing how he took them out, or the fact, or the source that he took them out of Bavel, he brings a whole pasuk from the second parak of Ezra, where it gives names of people who wanted to see their Sefer Yuchsin, their kahuna lineage, to see if they were kosher kohanim, right? Because it was told to them that they can't eat, right? They can't eat karbanos anymore, because we weren't sure if they were in fact kosher kohanim or not. And the Gemara concludes and says, "Va'amar lahem," and Ezra said to them, "Hareyatem b'chezkatchem," you are in your presumptive status, meaning despite that you failed to provide any proof that you were actually kosher kohanim, right? Nevertheless, you retained your kohanic lineage. And Ezra said to them, when you were in Bavel, when you were outside of Eretz Yisrael, what did you eat? Right? What did you partake in? You took only things that you could eat that don't have Beis Hamikdash boundaries, such as truma. Truma you could eat anywhere. So too, avka nami b'kod shevu. So too, when now you're back in Eretz Yisrael, you could only take in truma. You're only allowed to eat truma. You can't partake in anything kodshim related that have to be eaten inside the walls of Yerushalayim. Okay? So the Gemara parenthetically learns that they were put out of the kahunaship, meaning that they were halalim, so that means that was the proof. But the bottom line is, we see that we go after Chazakah. So the Chazakah that Ezra used was so strong that based on the chazakah of what they were before, they were allowed to continue eating, not kachim, but at least they were able to continue to eat truma. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction on the source of chazakah and how far we extend chazakah, both in regarding the Yerushalmi and Kedushin, that we actually kill someone based on a chazakah, and a kohen could actually eat truma based on chazakah. So now we're going to start the Gemara a little bit by discussing the source of 3 years. Remember what the Mishnah said? Shalosh shanim. So the Gemara over here on Daf Chav Ches, we're back to the Gemara right in the middle of 28a. Amar Rav Yochanan Shemati Mohoche Usha Shemanan Chazakah Gimel Shanim Mishar Hamuid. Mashor Hamuid Kivan Shenagach Gimel Negichos Nafak Lemecheskas Tam Bekam Lebecheskas Moed Achinami Kivan the Achal Tla Shanim Nafak Mershus Moche Bekam Lebershus Talokeya. So this is one of the weirdest comparisons that the Gemara tries to, at least in the beginning, make regarding finding a source for the concept of 3 years, right? So how do we know that, in fact, once 3 years have gone by and the mocher, right, didn't protest, and you don't have to keep your shtar anymore, how do you know that after 3 years as a squatter, you have attained the chazakah? So we learn it from the concept of cheskas, of the shor hamuid. Okay, so when it comes to the shor hamuid, we know that the Torah in Mishpatim says that if I have an ox and the ox gores once, it gores twice, it gores 3 times, you start paying nezek shalim. Okay, if you remember from Bava Kama, the first 3 times, well, we'll see exactly, but there's the third time you enter into a new category. Okay, so we're going to take that concept of 3 and apply it to chazakah somehow. Okay, so if you look, Rashi, there's a very just a basic machlokas regarding how we learn from the Shor HaMoed. So before we see the Gemara in Bava Kama, Rashi is of the opinion that just like the Shor HaMoed, okay, has 3 negichos, okay, after 3 negichos, the shor has his matzav, as they say, his status. His status changes, and he goes into a brand new status. So too, the 3 years changes the status to a new status, to a new owner. Okay, so the muhzak is now in charge of the property, and if the ma'arer, i.e., the one protesting who says get out of here, has a problem, the burden of proof is in his lap now. He's got to go and figure out a way how to get the machzik out of the property. Okay? Because 3 years is like, right? 3 years is what seals the deal. Okay? So that's what we call a hochacha. Okay? It's proof. And therefore, if in fact there was a claim, he had to hold a shtar. And if he doesn't have a shtar anymore after 3 years, then that's it. Sorry, you can't protest anymore, because the Gemara ends up saying, not now, but at least after 3 years, you don't have to hold on to your shtar anymore. Okay? The Chassam Sofer also adds a little bit, you should know, to that Rashi. He says that after 3 years, and nobody came and said boo to this person living in the property, the original name of the owner, the previous owner, is dissolved. That's it. His name is history. It's gone, right? And therefore his claim is no longer exists. And therefore you go after the machzik. Okay, so that's the addition of the Chassam Sofer, who explains it's not just that this machzik is zoche now. The original claim or any possible claim from the previous owner completely disintegrates. Okay, Tosfos actually has a different way of learning from the Shor HaMoed. He calls it a what we call a hochacha, meaning that the first 3 years, just like by the Shor HaMoed, who gores 3 times, and we're going to see later on what this means, his teva changed. It's known retroactively that there was something innate in this shore, that he was really born, pardon the pun, to be wild, right? He was just a nagchan. We just didn't know it until now, but he had this stored up in him. It was in his DNA. So therefore, that's what comes out in the wash, right? So therefore, this person who wasn't mocha for 3 years, right? He's what we call a shatkan, right? He's silent. So therefore, he can't protest anymore. All right. So therefore, it was meant to be, so to speak, that this muhsak is now muhsak in this field, right? It's meant to be his. So they're not so far off. We're going to see later on what the root of this machlokes is. But let's go, because I want to look at the Gemara in Bava Kama. I didn't get a chance. This was the month or two in Bava Kama that I was out on sick leave. So I want to go back to a Mishnah actually on Daf Chaf Gimel in Bava Kama. All right, the Mishnah talks about a famous machlokes. What is the definition of a shor tam, and what's the definition of a shor mu'id? Let me open it up. So. Okay. Eze hutam ve'eze mu'id. Mu'id kol shehidu bo shlosha yamim v'tam mishiachsa bo shlosha yamim div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says when it comes to a short tam, we go after the days. Okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay, third time, that's what makes you a mu'id. A tam, so when do you ever get back to be a tam status? How do you do tshuva if you're the ox? Well, 3 days have to pass, okay, with you being calm. Okay, Tosfos discusses a little bit more in detail. We don't have time for it. Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir Omer Mued Shehidu Bo Shlosha Pa'amim. Rabbi Meir says, no. This has nothing to do specifically with days. It's not Monday morning, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning. It's times. Muad Shehidu Bo Shlosha Pa'amim. 3 times. It could even be in one day. The tam kol shiat tinokos mishmashon bo ve'eno degeach. So if it has to do with times, then what could be a barometer for the shor to do tshuva and go back to being a tam? According to the first opinion, if it's days related, then I understand days have to go by, and of course it has to be in a same situation where it sees animals. That's what the Mefarshim discuss. You can't just lock it in the basement, count 3 days, because that's cheating, right? It has to have the Yetzer Hara to go gore again, right? Or else it doesn't count. Okay, there's a message in there, but not for now. Rab Meir says that no, it goes by times. Okay, so how do you get back to being a tam if it goes by times? So the only way to do it, the Mishnah ends off by saying, "V'tam kol shia hatinoks memashmin bo ve'eno nogeach." If you put it in front of children and they pet it nicely, and the animal is laid back and doesn't gore them, so that's how you know that this animal is back to being a nice animal. It's a tam, and it passed the tam test. Okay, that's what the Gemara says. So if you look, that's what the Mishnah says. So if you look at the Gemara says, "My time is Rabbi Yehuda." Okay, again, this is very, very interesting. That's why I want to spend time on going over exactly how we could learn. Again, we're trying to figure out what in the world does 3 times goring have to do with Chazakah Shalosh Shanim. Yes, they have the number 3 in common, but so does baseball. Right, 3 strikes. What does 3 have? Right, IRS. Right, 3 years you don't have to hold on to your tax returns. Right. So, well, what does it have to do with? What does it have to do with Shor HaMuad? So the Gemara says, "My time at Rabbi Yehuda." What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda, who says what? That it's 3 days. Amar Abaye Tumol Chad. The Gemara, the pasuk in Mishpatim says, right? Tumol Shilshom. Okay, so Tumol Chad, Mitmol Trey, Shilshom Plasa. Right, the first 3 times. Yesterday is 1 day. Today is 2 days. The day before yesterday indicates 3 days. Okay, we have a word. I don't know how many other languages we have it, but there's actually one word to say in 3 days, which is shilshom. And then it says, and you didn't watch after 3 days. So the fourth incident, that's it. He's a mu'id, and now he pays nezek shalom. Rava Amar, tumol mitmol. Rava says, no, tumol mitmol is 1. Shilshom is trey. And therefore, if you didn't watch it on the third one, you are chayav. There's a very, very problematic Rashi on this Gemara in Bava Kama that basically explains that within Rabbi Yehuda, who says that this is dependent on the days, Abaya and Rava changed the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because Abaya says it's 3, right? How is it in baseball? The third strike, and then you're out. So if someone were to ask you how many strikes you get, you wouldn't say 4, because you only get 3. After 3 strikes, you're gone, right? So that's exactly what Abaya says. According to Rava, it's 2, meaning after the second strike, you're out. You're a mu'ad. I didn't say that. The Gemara doesn't say that. That's what Rashi says. And it's a very, very difficult Rashi to learn for many reasons, because Tosfos discusses it, and what Tosfos concludes is that you can't take that literally, right? You can't take what Rashi said, that Rava within Rabbi Yehuda would actually say that after 2 times you are out, okay? Because, let me hear the words of Tosfos. Tosfos on, I'm sorry, Sechta, because Tosfos in Bava Kama, Taf Gimel Amud Beis on the bottom, actually says, V'Rashi atzmo chazarbo, mishum de bereish cheskas habatim kamar stam de Gemara imashar hamoed and the gicha ta'al lo machayva. Because the Gemara itself, we didn't get to it yet in Bava Basra, but the Gemara itself says, what are you talking about? How could you compare it to a cheskas gimel shanim? When it comes to a shor, it's the 4th time. That's when you pay nezek shalom. You need to establish yourself, right? After 3 times. 3 times you're established. Now you're a moed. Monday you gore, Tuesday you gore, Wednesday you gore. Now you're officially a moed. If you gore next Friday, then that's the 4th time. And you're chayiv nezek, and then you're chayiv nezek shalom. So how in the world could Rashi explain within Rava, who we happen to hold like, which makes the question even stronger, that it's 2 strikes and you're out? There's something very wrong with that. That's a very, very separate discussion now, but you should just know that. So that's that. So again, we see that it's actually a machlokes, and just the way the Gemara ends off by saying, okay, so that's one opinion. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda said it's the days. What do Rav Meir say? Rav Meir says, no, we go after times. We don't go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. If he gored Monday 8 a.m., Monday 10 a.m., Monday 11 a.m., that's it. You don't need to wait till Tuesday. 3 times in 1 day, and he's a moed. What's the reason? The Tanya Amar of Meir, if he's chayav, if he did it on different days, i.e. in intervals, you're chayav. Could you imagine how much more you're chayav if he did it in 3 hours on one day on Monday instead of waiting? It's a very, very good kal vachomer. We're going to get back to that kal vachomer in a second. But before we get to that, there's a Rishima Shiurim. Rabbi Chanan has this discussion, and he kind of echoes Tosfos's problem. He says, "Shalonis kavana lomar aliba de perish rishon de bekunshus shalarava natsem mued bebeis negichos." He says, kind of like Tosfos, don't even think that according to the first opinion of Rava in Rabbi Yehuda, that after 2 times you're chayav. It's everyone holds that it's 3 strikes and you're out. Like in baseball, there's no one who disagrees with that. So he has a whole discussion, and he basically says that so we get a little into yeshiva language with the word chalos, but it basically means in a fancy way that in the 3rd time, the switch now is turned on. Not that you start paying, but on the 3rd day on Wednesday, when you gore, there's a new chalos. There's a new, what's the word in English? I don't know. There's no word for chalos in English. There's a new status. The switch is, right, the valve is turned on, and now he's officially a mu'ed. But the repercussions of him being a mu'ed are not going to be realized until he actually does another goring on a subsequent day, to which he's going to pay nezek shalom. Okay, so I want to go back to that. Whatchamacallit for a minute. I want to go back to that kal vachomer. Remember what Rav Meir said? Meir said if he gores on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, he becomes a mu'ed. So could you imagine if he gored Monday at 8, Monday at 9, Monday at 10 a.m.? Certainly he's a mu'ed. So I want to read something, okay? And it goes to show you how we have this concept in goring and halacha, right? In Shor HaMu'ed, and we're going to apply the philosophy, okay? We're going to take that and we're going to apply it to a law in the Shulchan Aruch, in Orach Chaim. Okay, I am reading from the Tur Shulchan Aruch, 114, Orach Chaim. The Tur says, not the Beis Yosef, the Tur. Hamispalo ve'eno yodea im hiskir im lav. This is talking about right around Sukkot time when we change from Morid Atal to Mashiv HaRuach. Okay, this happens to a lot of people. You say Shmona Esrei, and you don't really remember at the end if you said the right one. Right? We all go through this. So we have what's called a 30-day rule. Right? We have a 30-day rule when it comes to Pesach about cleaning a house. We have 30-day rule by a lot of things. Right? We have a 30-day rule, which is Kodem Lamed Yom Chazakah, Mashehu Lamud Mazkir. So if we're a couple of weeks past Sukkot, it's within 30 days. So chances are what you've been saying for the last 6 months since Pesach is probably what you said in Shmona Esrei. Bikan ve'elach, after 30 days, Mashet Tzarech Mazkir. After 30 days, you learned the new law, right? It sunk in, it took a while, but now you're so used to saying Mashiv HaRuach. Hilkach. Adlamad Yomim Safek, Lo Im Hiskiri Olav Tzarech Lachzor. Bottom line, up until 30 days, if you're Mesupuk, right, you have to go back. You got it wrong. You have to repeat Shmona Esrei. The Mistama Lo Hiskir, because chances are you got it wrong. The same is true after Pesach. Ready for this? The Haram Ruttenberg. We all know the famous Ram of Rav Meir of Ruttenberg. Okay, 1200s, I believe. Hayaragil Lomar b'Shmini Atzeres. Okay, Shmini Atzeres. You know what he would do while everyone else was saying Hakafos? He would say Birchas Ata Gibor Tishim Pamim. He would say Ata Gibor in Shmona Esrei 90 times. Ad Mashiv Aruach Hamorid Agashem. Keneged Lamid Yom Sheomer Oso Gibor Pamim B'chol Yom. To combat the 30-day rule. Following? There are now, the truth is there's more than 3 Shmona Esreis a day because there's Rosh Chodesh, there's Shabbos, there's about 100 and change, but the Bach actually asked that question. We'll put that question aside. There are 90, right? There's 90 times. So he would say Ata Gibor 90 times the Achshav Imhaya Masupuk. So therefore, if the next day he actually didn't know, Ein Tzarach Lachsa. We'd say, I don't have to go back now because I'm used to saying it. Chances are I said it. Where does he get such a proof from? Well, we know the answer to that. V'rayaso miparakate said regular comes from what we just said in Bava Kama 10 minutes ago. Just like when it comes to the animal, if he's chayav for goring on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, certainly he's chayav if he did it all in one day, 3 times at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. Hachinami kiven da'achar lamid yom. So too over here regarding tefillah. If after 30 days in Masupuk, Ein Tzarach Lachsa. Right? He doesn't have to go back. Kol sheken sadi pamim biyom echad. If after 30 days, right, we're going to use the same kal v'chomer. If after 30 days he's used to it, day after day after day, what if he compacts those 30 days into one day by saying something 30 times, 3 times, 90 times in one day? Wow. This is unbelievable. Right? You would think that this is someone making this up. He says no. He says you could do it. By the way, you know someone's going to argue. V'harav Rabbeinu Peretz zal kasav lo chazina lo rabbanan kshishi de tzarfat aveyachi. No. The French rabbis never would permit this. Why? He says it's a nice try, but if you actually think about it for a minute, the two don't line up well. Shein hanidon domel l'raya. Close but no cigar. When it comes to the animal, it goes by nature. So obviously this animal has something, he's attracted to gore. So therefore, if he gores over 3 days, every day he gores for 3 days. So obviously if he gores after 3 hours, then you're right. But what's Mashav HaRuach all about? It's not about our body reacting to something. It's what we call Hergel Lashono. It's called, we got used to it by speaking. So that's not the same thing as getting used to, as one animal getting used to another animal. Now, he doesn't explain why. It's on the right track, but it's still not 100%. He doesn't explain anymore, but you could see why it's not maybe 100% the same. Okay, and the Tur brings down his father, which is the Rush. He actually agrees with the Maharam, and that's that. And I wanted to just, but before we get to the end, there's a getting back to this machlokes, whether or not, for example, by Mashiv HaRuach, it works. You could actually explain this based on the more famous chakiras about what this is all about. Brian, hang on. I just want to finish this. We have 5 more minutes. I'll take your question. But there's a famous, and we brought this up once or twice. It's the old yeshivish chakira called Siman versus Siba, right? Siman means it's a reflection of something, and Siba is a reason for it. So in order to explain this discussion in the Shulchan Aruch, as well as how we view a Chazakah and the 3 times, right? A Siba, a reason, is something that we do repeatedly. So if we repeat something 90 times, that causes you, it gives you a reason to make a change, right? However, if you hold that this whole thing of chazakah, getting used to something, is more of a siman, it's not that we see this or after 3 years, that's the reason why it changes status, or that's the reason why the animal now is goring because it saw another animal. It's just a siman. It's just as we call it's indicative. It's almost like what the way Tosfos explained. Remember, Tosfos said it's something. Remember, we used the word DNA before. It's something in this animal. It reveals that the tendency was always there. So therefore, if the tendency was if it's repeating, then yeah. If I repeat something 90 times, like if I'm learning a line on a play and I repeat it 90 times like a broken record, that's the reason why I will remember it. But that's the reason only. That's the siba. It's not a siman that I know it. A siman is something inherent. So therefore, right? So therefore, if something is more of a siman, it reveals what the tendency always was. So therefore, we can't compare that to Mashiv Haruach because we don't have a tendency one way or another to say Mashiv Haruach or Moridatal because every season it changes. So a siba is more fitting. Yeah, the reason if you memorize something 90 times, then it's in your head. You're not going to forget. So therefore, it's more of a, it's more of a siba. And therefore, in conclusion with this aspect at least, just like the 3 years of when the Gemara talks about 3 years compared to the Shor HaMoed, let's hang on to that because I just want to get to one last thing that I just remember before we end, and that is we have one Gemara on Chavtes, on Lamed. We have about, I think, 8 or so cases of someone basically going to someone and kicking him off his land. So I was thinking, right, we have these real estate feuds. So I was thinking, where's like the first time we ever had this concept where someone said to someone, get off my land? So believe it or not, you go back all the way to the beginning of time. What am I referring to? I'm referring to a pasuk in Parshas Bereishis. Ready for this? And I want to conclude with this. The pasuk says, open it up. We all remember the story of Cain and Hevel. ויאמר השם אל קין למה חרה לך ולמה נפלו אפיך הלא אם תטיב שעש אם לא תטיב לפסח חטאת רובץ ולכת לשדודו ואתה תמשול בו. ויאמר קין אל הבל אחיו. Cain told his brother, ויהי ביוסם בשדה, when they were in the field, ויקם קין אל הבל אחיו ויהרגהו. Okay, the first murder in the Torah. What was the first murder in the Torah? So the Torah says nothing. Doesn't say what they were fighting about, aside from the fact that they had this machlokas about the korban. If you happen to look in the Medrash, it's an unbelievable Medrash. I spent a long time thinking about this. I don't have the answer yet, but this is one of those things you have to think about. It says the Medrash, I'm reading from Bereishis Rabbah, right? Again, what was the question? The question is, who was the first person in the history of the world to say, get off of my land? Right? We had it on Daf Chavtes, we had it on Daf Lamed, Lamed Aleph, Lamed Beis, right? We had 5 days in a row of people telling their neighbors, get off of my property. So the very first time is Cain and Hevel. Alma hayu medainin. What in the world were Cain and Hevel fighting about? Amru, they said to each other, Ba'u v'nachlok esa olam. Let's divvy up the world between us. Echad natal karkos, v'echad natal metalpulin. One of them took the land, all the real estate in the world, and one of them took all of the metalpulin. That's the way they wanted to split up the world. Dain Amar Aradaat Kamala Hadidi. After about a minute, they looked at each other, and one said to the other, hey, it looks like you're standing on my land. right? Dainamar, ma da'at lavish didi. The jacket that you're wearing, I think that belongs to me. Dainamar chalotz. One said, "Hey, take your jacket off," and the other one said, "V'dainamar prach," and the other one said, "Fly off of my land. You can't be standing on my land." Mitoch kach vayakam kayin el hevel achi vayahargeu. Right? That's what the machlokas was about. There's so much meaning into this. I was thinking about it for 5 days. I don't have a real good explanation. I'll tell you my problem with this medrash. My problem with the medrash is that there's three other reasons why Cain killed Havel, and they both actually make sense. The problem is this one doesn't make any intellectual sense, at least, because why would you consider splitting the world like that? That's absolutely inconceivable. The three other opinions is they were arguing about whose lot the Beis Hamikdash would be built in, which, by the way, is also the Shvatim had a similar argument. If you remember the Gemara in Sota, the other machlokas is they were arguing about Chava, and the third one they were arguing about the extra twin that was born with Hevel. Cain claimed the second twin of Hevel, and Hevel said, "No, it's my twin. It was born with me." So fighting over women has always been since time immemorial. That's understandable. The Beis Hamikdash, everybody wants kavod, right? Who wouldn't want the Beis Hamikdash built in their lot? They don't understand what this means. There's a deeper meaning behind this Hatfield and McCoy situation over here with Cain and Hevel, and I'm really, really searching for an understanding as how they could, according to this opinion, set up a system where it's binary. You either get everything, you get all the land, and you get nothing. Like as they say in yeshiva, what was the Havamina? How could you even think that this type of, again, these were presumably, smart, rational people, right? How could you presumably think that such a division could actually make sense? And I want to leave you on that note, something to think about, and maybe there's a lesson in there, but it's just not clicking. So on that note,